Hello everybody, my name is Essam. I'm from Egypt and I'm here today to talk to you about TypeScript with React. I've been a React and ReactNative developer for over 2 years now, and in general I've been working as a full stack engineer since 2014. I've been building JavaScript apps since we were doing it in one big chunk of code. So this today is supposed to be a case study in TypeScript with React. First, let me introduce BeneStudio. We are a mobile and web solutions company. We build apps with React Native, and we build web apps with React.js. We build full stack solutions as well. And when it kicks in, when it's needed, we also build native apps. So, first, the TypeScript plus React. Has anybody used this before? Both of them together? Okay, that looks good. How many have used TypeScript in general? That's more. Okay, so we seem to have some people here who haven't tried TypeScript before. That's good because that serves me, because I'm going to also give an introduction to TypeScript. I don't want to get too into the code. I'm not presenting a tutorial here, but rather what I want to do is I hope that by the time you will leave the talk today, those of you who don't use TypeScript will be thinking they should use it, and those of you who use TypeScript will be thinking maybe I shouldn't use it. So what is TypeScript? This is large definitions, and of course we all love those large definitions, but I'm going to sum it up and just say that TypeScript is adding types to JavaScript. Of course, I think everybody here knows about JavaScript, and how many are not JavaScript developers? Nice. Okay, so the TypeScript website defines it as JavaScript that scales. And for those of us who have worked with JavaScript for a long time now, for years, the JavaScript ecosystem has actually outgrown itself for a lot since about 2 or 3 years ago, because the tools we are using today are very different, and TypeScript is one sign of that. TypeScript is also very, very well received by the JavaScript community since about 2012 now. So it's been established for about 7 years, which is a great time for a tool to develop. And now I believe it is very mature. So I'm not against TypeScript here, for those of you who are already using it, but I think in general that in the JavaScript community now, there seem to be lots of people who think that some stuff are de factos. Like you have to use TypeScript in your code, and this needs to be shaken a bit. There isn't a specific tool that you must use. You must always question yourself. You must always think, am I using the right tools? Am I doing stuff the right way? And this is what I hope to achieve today. These are some of the very famous projects that are done in TypeScript. I don't know if I mentioned it, but TypeScript is made by Microsoft, and the Microsoft tool Visual Studio Code is also written in it, in the Electron framework. The GitHub desktop in the Electron framework is also written in TypeScript, and the Angular project, of course, is written in TypeScript, and Angular developers use TypeScript while developing it. This is a statistic from the GitHub trends, and TypeScript comes third in the fastest growing languages on GitHub. And GitHub trends also mentions that they are seeing a trend towards statically typed languages focused on type safety and interoperability. That means that in general, the community is heading towards type safety. They are heading towards more or less dynamically typed languages. So this is why I want to talk today about TypeScript. So when I was first introduced to TypeScript, I was a bit hesitated because I didn't know if it was worth it. Should I learn something new? Do I need this tool? And I think this is when I had the first problem, that when I started Googling, I wanted to see real reasons why I should use this tool. Why should I add one more tool? Especially that the JavaScript ecosystem is full of packages When you run a create React app, for example, you start with 15 million lines of code, which is a big, big number to start with. So why should I add more code to the one I already have? And when I actually Google that, most of the tutorials and most of the stuff out there didn't have real reasons, didn't have some convincing answers to that. I went on and I did some more Googling and I asked some people. I went on Facebook groups. I wanted to just collect as many opinions as I can about this, on why people actually use TypeScript. And some of the silliest answers out there were, you should use TypeScript because you will know that you should use it after you start using it for like a couple of months. That really didn't make sense to me, because I want to know now. I don't want to know after I spend 2 months with a tool. So this is why I want to introduce it today. I want to share the pros and cons. Maybe that's a bit early. I want to share the pros and cons of using TypeScript. And I want to share some real challenges that we have faced at Bina Studio while building with TypeScript. So for those of you who don't know about TypeScript, this is a very simple example. Oh, well, those lines are really tearing the code apart, but you can easily see this is a JavaScript function. It adds 2 numbers, nothing too fancy. Here you have defined that the first argument to this is a number, the second argument is a number, and the return is a number. And the first thing you will notice here, or the first value you have gained here, is you do not need to check here if you have been passed a number. I think most of us have ran into cases where you add a string to a number and you get that weird hybrid result. This is TypeScript safety here. This is why you don't have to run into this when using JavaScript. This is a bigger example. This is something called an interface in TypeScript. And an interface is like an object, a JSON object in JavaScript. An interface is a definition of a structure of data, not just a simple piece of data. Here I've defined that a person, interface called iPerson, and it has a first name, it has a last name. Then I defined here a function called getFullName, and its argument is an argument called person, which is of type iPerson. The return of it is a string. That's another thing about TypeScript, is you don't have to keep defining the types of data too much. You don't have to put too much code in there with the type, because if I say const x equals letter x, it knows that it's a string. So that's one thing it takes away. Here what it does is it returns the first name combined with the last name, so it knows it's a string. What you will get here by the end of it is, if you pass the wrong arguments here, if you pass here an object that doesn't have a key last name, or, which is more frequent, if you misspell last name and put the N here in a small letter, which also happens a lot, at least with me, you will not get this with TypeScript. So it protected you from misspellings, from some of the stuff that usually happen with regular JavaScript. Now, for those of us who develop with React, including myself, this is a very simple React view. It just displays a div here. And the job of TypeScript here is to specify what do the props that this component takes. For those of you who don't use TypeScript with React, it's similar to the prop types package. And you can specify also how the state looks. And then you pass that here as iProps, and you can also pass the state here. And what you get in the end is a component that is TypeScript compatible, and it will check the props for you. This is a very brief introduction to TypeScript so that everybody's in scope, everybody knows what we're talking about here. And now I want to talk about the real thing. I want to talk about what I'm here for, which is, should you use TypeScript or should you not use TypeScript? And just a spoiler alert is, I'm not going to give an answer. I'm just going to give some clues on what's good about it, what's bad about it, should you use it or should you not use it. Well, it's called TypeScript, and the type system is a no-brainer. You are going to use a TypeScript system with TypeScript, and the thing here is, I want to stress this one more time. I want to confirm that a TypeScript is actually beneficial, because with a type system, you will not fall in some of the common pitfalls that you would usually fall in when developing in JavaScript. You will avoid some of the mistakes that shouldn't go into production, that shouldn't go live. You shouldn't misspell a variable, you shouldn't misspell an argument, and then in return you get a production deployment that doesn't work. TypeScript will protect you from that using the type system it has. To sum this up, or to give a clearer explanation of this point, is you will have many lists. Undefined is not a whatever error, because TypeScript will probably not let you pass this kind of argument to a function. It probably won't let you mistype a variable and end up with something that doesn't work because it's not what it's supposed to do. Then another thing here about TypeScript is the compile time errors. Although it sounds silly, and although it is something of a no-brainer as well, you will not run into runtime errors if you don't have a runtime to start with. The compile time errors are actually a very efficient tool, especially because you can hook it into your CI. I have worked with JavaScript for a long time, and usually we just do the linting with the regular JavaScript. To have a more sophisticated way of knowing if this code actually works. I'm not talking here about a code that looks good. I'm not talking about a code that is the labels or the names or the variable names are following some standards only. We want to check if our code actually works. And what happened with me when I started with TypeScript was the first couple of compiles I started, the first couple of commits that I did, I ran into a lot of errors that I usually would not run into with the regular JavaScript. And the good thing about this is, as you develop more, as you use TypeScript more, you start feeling more confident about your code. If it passes the compiler, that means that the code is probably actually working. And again, probably. It's not working, it's probably working. It passed the code sanity level. You didn't pass some silly named variable, you didn't pass in something you shouldn't pass. You actually have code that makes sense here. And by the way, one thing that some people would say is that you should use TypeScript because you don't have to write tests. Well, that's wrong. You will need to write tests. Some people say that because they think that when you just pass the right argument, you will get the right return, but that's not necessarily true. A good thing about this is in a small function like add two numbers, you don't need to check if they are actually numbers. That's the difference between not having to test and having compile time errors that actually make sense. Here's a third thing. From the beginning of any project, and in the previous talk, I noticed that there was this one slide that mentioned put the rules from day one. And this is what we all try to do every time. You start the project, and guys, we will do it this way, and you start enforcing some linting rules that will make your code look cleaner. You start doing as much as you can so that the code doesn't run out of control by the time you're finished with the project. And TypeScript is a very conservative tool. It tries its best so that by the time you are done with the project, you have clear and clean and maintainable code. You have a structured code. You have something that is basically what you could call a clean code. And my definition of clean code, which is, I think a lot of people would agree on, is code that when someone else hops into the project, they know what is happening here. They can make sense of this. This is a good thing about TypeScript, is that it's still JavaScript. That the perks of TypeScript, all those good things about it, you don't need to shift to a completely new language. You're not writing something that you're not familiar with. It's still JavaScript. You're still in the scope of writing the same language. You are still using JavaScript. And by the way, TypeScript always lets you use the latest version of ECMAScript specification. So you will have arrow functions, you will write object-oriented code, you will do everything how you would do it in JavaScript, but in a cleaner and more maintainable code again. This is a very important feature of TypeScript. When you start working in a project that's already there, or project that's been going for like a couple of years or something, and you hop in and for a second there you will just freeze and say, what the hell is going on here? We take a couple of minutes to make sense of what's happening inside of a code base that has been going for a long time, especially when you start getting closer to the deadlines. That's when you start writing code that is not really good, but it's working. And that's a good feature of TypeScript. It's self-documenting. When I hop into some TypeScript code and I see those interfaces, I see those types, I know what this function is doing without even having to sit with another developer explaining it to me, because the code itself is very well structured. The type system will make sure that the code you have written is a good code. And last is a better IDE experience, because when you have when you're using, for example, Visual Studio Code, you have all these extensions that will make your life much easier. You will be much more productive when you're using TypeScript, because it's better, or it's easier for the IDE to know what it should expect from you, or what this definition of this function is. It will help you because the types of the functions or the classes are very well written, and the extensions will make your life much easier. And now, I just want to give a summary about the pros here. Is TypeScript is a good tool in general. If you want to label it one word, it's a good tool. It is worth the addition of your existing code base, for example. You will have types, you will have compile time errors, you can hook that into your CI, you will write better code, and you can trust your fellows more, because when you hook in something like the compile time, the TypeScript compiler, when you hook that into your CI, you know that your teammates are also writing code that is as well enforced on the best practices of JavaScript as you are. Now, let's take a look at the cons of using TypeScript, if you can call it that. TypeScript has a large overhead. You will write more code, and that means you're going to take more time writing that code. And you will take more time fixing some stuff that are not really errors. I have spent sometimes hours fixing something that is not even an error. It's not an error in the logic of the project. It's something that is just with TypeScript. And that happens especially with some stuff like the guys here are already working with React. When you try to make a higher order component, the props passed to a higher order component are some stuff that you have to mix and match between the props and specify which props are you going to pass to that child component. For those of you who are not working with React, what I'm trying to say here is TypeScript sometimes will make your life a living hell, because something that is supposed to work, TypeScript does not like. I'm not saying here that there is a logic error. I'm saying that sometimes TypeScript will have its own errors, because TypeScript requires you to write more code that will make sense to TypeScript itself. Third-party libraries, and that's something that no JavaScript project will run without. You will always have third-party libraries. And the thing here is, when you have third-party libraries with TypeScript, TypeScript will complain about those libraries if they don't have type definitions. Simply, I am passing a number, and the library does not have types. The library does not know what kind of arguments I should pass, and then TypeScript compiler will say, I don't know what to do here. You have one of two decisions that you can make here. One is, you can simply tell TypeScript to ignore this library, and in this case, you're not making much use of the original decision. This is why I added TypeScript in the first place. I added it so that I can gain the benefit of having types. Now I'm instructing it to simply ignore that library. Another decision is, I don't know which is worse. It's like choosing between two horrible decisions. The other thing is sitting and writing definitions for that library, or at least for the functions you're going to use of that library. I see people here agreeing with me. You've been through the same nightmare. This is time consuming. You will have to actually sit in front of that library. What is this function doing? What types should it be passed? What type is it returning? And simply, most of us sometimes don't have the time for that. You want something to go live. Your project manager expects something from you by the end of the day. You will not always have the time to type define a library. And now, for the thing that I had a meme for in the previous thing, the pros, I'm now going to contradict myself. I'm now arguing against the compile time errors. Runtime type checking does not exist in TypeScript. You cannot do it. Sometimes, and we all go through that, is you will write very good code and you will expect something not to be null, and you will tell TypeScript that it's not null, and then what happens is it's actually null. And you don't have any way to avoid that with TypeScript, because all it does is the compile time errors. It does the static type checking and the compile time only, no runtime. So what will happen is this. It built, it's fine, let's go live, and then you have an app that crashes because you trusted TypeScript too much. And that's what happens in general. When you trust something too much, you have to test stuff a lot. And by the way, when I said about what I said about the adding the two numbers, this is something that will make you a bit question yourself. Should I actually not check if they are numbers? Because usually TypeScript will not fail, but what if it did? And then you become paranoid. You don't know if you should actually check the types. Should you not check the types? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of confused faces. Yeah, I am confused as well, and I was confused as well. And I think, in general, anything will need the right evaluation. You will need to actually evaluate the tool. You shouldn't trust the tool too much. And this is the last con I'm gonna encounter. This is the one where I don't provide a personal opinion. And this is the one where I will provide numbers for TypeScript, or specifically a number for TypeScript. So, all in all, we've talked about TypeScript. We have pros and we have cons. We are confused and we don't know, should we pick TypeScript, should we not pick TypeScript? I was actually hesitated whether or not I should add this to the cons, because the number I'm going to display is something that it's, after all, it's a matter of perspective. You can see it's a good number, you can see it's a bad number, but on a research paper called To Type or Not to Type, you should probably also Google that and take a look at that paper, a team tackled 398 projects from GitHub. They gathered a sample of some of the issues that those projects encountered, and they started running the same code again, but this time typed with TypeScript. This time they tried to see if TypeScript would have prevented those errors from happening, or those bugs from going live. And the number was 15%. This is the number that TypeScript could prevent, 15% of the total of bugs that TypeScript could detect. And another thing is Flow, if you guys are familiar with Flow, or some of you are familiar with Flow, Flow is the Facebook's TypeScript, basically. It's a type system developed by Facebook. And by the way, Flow scored the same number, but Flow actually scores more on the setup, on the overhead, especially with React, because it's very well integrated with React. So those are some of the cons that I faced with TypeScript, and some other people faced, because I did some research on it. And the thing here is that 15% worth your time or not? Is that 15% worth the effort you're going to put into TypeScript? There is not a clear answer for that. Personally, I wouldn't say you should or shouldn't. I wouldn't say even I should or I shouldn't use TypeScript, because so far I can still use it. I still think it brings a good value, but looking at that number makes me question, should I actually put it in my code? If I plug it into my code, will I actually get real benefit? When I say real benefit, I mean versus the time I'm going to invest into the setup, I'm going to invest into fixing TypeScript errors, and I'm going to invest into writing all of that extra code. And that's it.